Oh man, no, and I appreciate you jumping in. I'm not sure what the time zone is for you. It's almost six
It's
o'clock for me.
Eastern. Yeah, it's
Okay, so we're on
Eastern.
the same.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so I know evenings get tricky. So the whole idea around this podcast, is Lindsay and I started Schoolio 4 years ago, and I didn't really have an educational background. I'm just an angry parent who at one point decided the system doesn't make sense, but I
Yeah.
also didn't know what to do with this feeling. Like, I know how to homeschool. My wife wasn't interested. There wasn't Microschools and learning pods 4 or 5 years ago, right?
Uh-huh.
And the pandemic really was like, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. I can figure stuff out. I've got enough friends to make a phone call, figure out what I can do. And then Schoolio sort of came out of that attitude of, well, if we can IKEA education and people can mix and match and build a perfect furniture for their child's bedroom, what would that look like? And that's what we set out to build. And then 4 years later, it's I still wake up some days and go, man, like over 1,000 students log in every
That's
morning.
awesome.
So this Microschools thing has been fascinating for me, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
part of what I was trying to figure out is learn more about the folks that are leading this next big movement, or origin story, sort of current sort of marketing things that, we can sort of share and advertise what you're doing. But also I would love, like, where is all this going in your crystal ball, just to kind of see, where the future is headed in this, because we're still learning day by day. And so I thought I'll invite a bunch of folks that are active in the group, share some content. And if you're okay with it, we would love to publish this as a unedited version so that people can just see us talk. So that's kind of it, to sort of share more knowledge. And I feel a lot of people can just, from just A, knowing other people are doing it, B, they're just good people trying to figure out a way to build something together, and we're already in it, sort of pulled and pushed. So I'm excited about it. Next year is our 5th year in
Congratulations.
We made it. We made it to year 5.
Congratulations.
Or knock on wood, man. There's 2 more weeks left.
You're gonna make it.
Yeah. So tell me your origin story. I mean, educator. How, give me some background.
So origin story. I love a good OG story, right? Because you can hear the music in the background building, right, for the good OG story. Well, my OG story is no different. I am a former public school teacher. Like I said, when I graduated from the best HBCU ever, Morgan State University, always going to plug the national treasure. But when I graduated from there, I started teaching in Maryland's public schools, and I taught 1st and 5th grade. And then when my husband and I got pregnant with our first, that's when I came home, right, to be a stay-at-home mom. Now, that kid has a late birthday in December. Matter of fact, his birthday is, I don't know what I was thinking, to have a baby after Christmas, not the move. But anyway, here we are, almost 26 years later, and he began reading when he was around 3. Not anything that I did, just one of those people that came here like that, right? And so at the time we were living in Baltimore City. Now, to put a little Black boy in Baltimore City's public schools that had a late birthday, that was already fluent, at that time he was probably at 2nd grade, 1st, 2nd grade level, without the ability for him to test and to move up to his appropriate instructional level, that would have been a recipe for a disaster. So I said, well, you know what, let's just continue what we were doing. At the time, I was using a program by the Institutes for the Achievement of Human Development. I think that's right. I'm Dr. Glenn Dolman. He was the originator of the How to Teach a Baby to Read series, the OG one. And so it's rooted in love, is rooted in the practice that I didn't know I was doing at that time, Satish, which it was unschooling before I knew what unschooling was, right? So Dr. Glenn Dolman, rest his soul, would say things like, you only show your baby the things that they absolutely love. You only offer your baby these things when they are joyful and you are joyful. You never ask for it back. So you never ever test. It's a gift, right? And you stop before they want you to stop. Okay. So that was how we began, right? And so we did that for many years, their encyclopedic knowledge. And then, all of the everything was labeled, even the dog. My husband came home, was like, why do we have the word dog written on the dog? I said, I'm trying to teach the babies how to read. That's how it works.
What's the I'm a visual thinker. What you just explained, what does that look like in action?
So what it looked like is, so imagine say a 2-year-old, right? A very active 2-year-old. The only time you can keep them, the only time that they are still is usually when they're eating. Even that might be touch and go. So when they're in a high chair, if their attention span would be for maybe 8 words, I would only show 6. And so the words are written large in these great big cards. The words themselves are about 2 to 3 inches big in bold red letters. And so if it's breakfast time and you know that your little one loves bananas and pancakes and apples, then you put those words that they love real big on those cards. And then whole word language is really what it is. You flash them really fast. Apple, banana, pancake, syrup. And then you tickle them or whatever it is that communicates as love, between you and that little one. And then that's it. Wow. Now, usually what would happen is the little one would always ask for more because, again, it is rooted in joy. I'm joyful. They're joyful. I stop before they want me to stop. So I complete that little session before, it becomes boring. And I'm talking about their favorite things and I never ask for it back. Right. So that's how we got started. So we did that for many years. And that's how we started homeschooling until my kids got a little older. When they're cute, when they're, 4, 5, 6, 7, somewhere around 9 or 10, when the adult teeth come in, right? You're like, wait a minute, you're looking like a big kid. I think I should be doing real school with you now. Right. So then, Satish, that's when I made my mistake. That's when I made the first mistake. And I began recreating school in my home. Okay. So I dusted off my degree and I found a curriculum and I created a school-like schedule in my home. And the joy went out the window and the autonomy went out the window. And the curriculum became centralized. Right. And so what that looked like, now by this time, I was probably up to kid number 4. I have 6 altogether. So here I am, right? I probably have a nursing baby. I probably have a toddler. And then, the other ones are school age. So I'm trying to teach. At the same time, the dog is barking. UPS is at the door. My husband's calling me, telling me like, hey, can you go to my desk and get such and such? So I'm trying to run a school while I'm trying to run a home. And they were in competition of each other.
Was the decision always to school at home?
It was, because where we were living at the time, I would not send my dog to a school in Baltimore City at that time. Not at that time. And probably not now, but I digress. So fast forward, I stumbled upon classical education, which I love the trivium, still have great respect for the trivium. You break it into those different developmental stages, right? Grammar stage from birth until about, 5th grade, logic stage, which is middle school, rhetoric for high school. Still have great respect for that. But I took it up a notch like I always do everything. I had my children dressed in uniforms to come to the dining room table. It was crazy. It was a Looney Toony. And we were doing the Latin, and, we were doing the amo, amas, amat, the whole conjugation, for the Latin verbs. I mean, we did it all. My older ones were reading the great works. And while they were very academically successful, I helped to start a co-op at the time, which is my version of a micro school in the world of homeschooling. We were doing that, but my kids were lethargic learners. They were disengaged. They were obedient and compliant, but no one was at home. I was burnt out. By now, I had had my 6th little one, and it just wasn't working. And I remember feeling the Sunday night blues real bad. Like I did not want to see that curriculum the next day. I didn't even want to see my kids the next day. And burnout was creeping in real bad. And so I said, I can't stay like this. And so there's got to be something else. And when I looked out over the homeschool landscape, I saw these people way in the back that seemed to be full of life and their kids were chilling and the parents were chilling. I was like, what is that? Then I leaned in and saw that they were doing that thing that I said I would never do. They were unschooling. And I said, oh no, that's unparenting. That is not what we do. Especially as an African-American woman, that's not what we do. But I couldn't stay where we were, right?
Yeah. I had the same reaction first time I heard that word. I'm like, what?
What type of undisciplined foolishness is that,
like,
right?
Isn't unschooling just playtime? What's
right?
What's schooling? Yeah. So
right, where is the school in that, right? So I said, well, I got to try something. So I started off light. So I gathered all the kids together and I said, okay, on Monday, because everything starts on Monday. On Monday, we're going to do this new thing. We're going to have, and I have to put on my TV voice to sell it. We're going to have classical mornings and delight-driven afternoons.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome for like 3 weeks. So I sat them down in the morning. I did my curriculum. Then after lunch, they got to be free and autonomous and curious, passionate, whatever it was that they wanted to learn about. I became their assistant, right? I saw the light come on. I saw this curiosity that I had never seen before. I saw this autonomy come out of them. I saw them run towards their interests. I saw them learn the same stuff I was trying to teach. I saw it enter their little minds easily and stick and stay until one morning came downstairs to teach, and these little ones had decided to do delight-driven afternoons before breakfast.
Ooh.
Right. I had a whole entire parent teacher conference in my head. The teacher in me said, put away those smiles, put that joy in your back pocket, put the curiosity on the shelf. It is time for classical mornings, time for me to teach you. But the mother in me said, well, wait a minute, isn't this what we want in the first place? Isn't this the whole point? And that is when our deschooling process led to full-blown unschooling, right?
Wow.
So fast forward, we were now living in joy. The kids were doing what they wanted to do, learning what they wanted to learn. A lot of it did look like play. My youngest one was maybe about 4 at this time, 4 or 5. And he completely taught himself how to read, never was forced to learn how to read. Well, my husband was diagnosed with leukemia in the middle of all of that. And it took us, a year of, back and forth to the hospital and keeping him, as healthy as possible. And then when he passed away, that's when I said, okay, what am I going to do now? Here I am. I've been a stay-at-home mom for 16 years. I have 6 kids. My youngest is 5. My kids are thriving in this thing called unschooling. Where am I going to put my kids if I have to return to work full time? Right. So I looked for the nearest school because they do have schools, right, that allow this practice. So Sudbury schools are the oldest in this country, followed closely behind by Agile Learning Centers. The nearest one was an hour away. That wasn't going to work. So I said, well, how about I start one? And so that is what led to that process of me creating what at that time was called the Genius Schools. So it's gone through some progression since then, but I'll pause the story right there.
Well, when I was checking out your website, and my background is technology. I've been a computer science nerdy kid since I discovered technology, but I never fully grasped the concept as DAO. Never really understood the idea around the blockchain and ledger. Everything just felt very temporary, even though the power of blockchain is really good. So when I went creeping around your world, I was like, wait, is she a DAO? And a lot of the language we were using, I don't think the community understands it. Decentralized learning. I'm just going to hop onto your website for a quick second. I remember, because what I loved is the way you worded it is like where the possibility of being free, connected, self-expressed, and autonomous in a decentralized, self-directed learning community on market school, makerspace school. So I was like, wait.
A lot of words, right?
Yeah, but each one of those independently is a separate business.
You know what I mean?
That, did you? Like Schoolio is a decentralized platform for education where you can learn K-8 anywhere in the world. Right. And that alone is a big idea in my head. And then when I started, looking at you, and then, when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, the thing that immediately connected was this idea that, if you judge a fish by his ability to climb a tree. And I remember my co-founder first said that like years ago when we first met. I was like, yo, I've been the fish my entire life.
See? Yeah.
And so I get instantly the narrative, but then for others in the group that's going to watch us talk, I need you to break it down for us, because I grew up at a time where, like, during the Schoolio evolution of, there was nothing, and then everybody had learning pods because there was nothing, and then we turned into these micro schools of like 4 to 5. So how do you explain for the sort of average person in the group going, okay, I love it, Karema, but break it down for me?
Break it down. I see, first of all, you and I grew up around the same era. So, that idea of breaking it down so it can forever be broke. I love that. So the concept of a DAO is the term DAO, D-A-O, Decentralized Autonomous Organization. It is very much a Web3 term, right? So I went to school in the 90s. And a class that I had back then was technology and education. And I'm sad to say, Satish, I failed that class, failed it miserably. And I failed it because the whole entire point and objective of that class was sending and receiving electronic mail.
Right.
And I said to myself back in 1995, who's ever going to use this? Like, if you want to send a letter, what do? You get a pen and paper, write a letter, put it in an envelope, go to the store, get a stamp, a book of stamps if you're balling, put the stamp on, walk to the corner, put it in the little blue box, wait about 3 weeks for it to come back to you. Who needs electronic mail? That was the beginning of Web 1, right? So fast forward, obviously we all need electronic mail. We all use it now. Fast forward, Web 2 was the onslaught of social media. So if you remember, and for those of you who may listen, who might be a little too young in the beginning, we didn't have this wonderful thing called the internet like we do now. You know, you had to dial up, you had to wait for a connection, and then the internet was very static. It was very black and white. It was very text read only. Around the Web 2 era came when like Mark Zuckerberg and others said, well, we can make this social thing. And these platforms began to erupt on the internet, and the internet became this thing that was more alive, more accessible. But we didn't own it. And we still don't own it, right? So when you put your content, when I put my content on any one of these Web 2 based platforms, Mark Zuckerberg owns it, right? Elon Musk owns it if it's on Twitter or X, right? Web 3 is all about ownership, and it's all about a decentralized version of ownership. So that's what a DAO is. Now, let me connect the dots. In my world of homeschooling, you heard my story, right? I was first a very traditional, very centralized homeschooler, just like in my public school when I was teaching. It's a very top-down approach. The curriculum is in charge, right? Or the teacher does what the curriculum does, and then the student does what the teacher tells them to do based on what the curriculum says. So it's very centralized around the curriculum or around the adult. In unschooling, I love the word unschooling. I love words, period. So we have school, we have deschooling, and then we have unschooling. The definition of school is built upon someone else's expectations. Right. Someone else has written the curriculum. Someone else tells you when to learn what. If you don't learn it by this time, someone else comes up with whatever that is, right? Deschooling, the prefix D means to come away from or to come off of. So you are coming away from someone else's expectation to the point of un. Un means the opposite of, right? So when unschooling, I am not following a centralized approach to learning. I'm not following someone else's expectation. I am centering what? I'm centering the learner. If I'm the learner, I center my experience, what I'm ready for right now, right? That is decentralizing learning, right? So in my mind, I've been at this now for 20 some odd years, right? When I wrote an app back when my husband, before he passed, when he was in the hospital, we were living in Pennsylvania at the time, one of the more stricter states here in the U.S. to homeschool. You have to have an evaluator come to your home. They have to see you, see your kids. And I wasn't at home to document our decentralized learning. When we were centralizing the learning, she understood the curriculum. She knew what it was, right? I showed her the curriculum, no big deal. But in a decentralized, real world learning experience, if my kids are baking cookies and I'm counting that as fractions in math, but I don't have a worksheet, how do I then document? So I was standing in the hospital room. I called home to check on the kids. I said, guys, what are you doing? How you doing? They were having a great time. I said, guys, you got to write down what you're doing because the evaluator's coming at the end of the year. They didn't write down anything. I hung up the phone and I remember
they ate all the cookies.
They ate all the cookies, right? They baked all the cookies, did all the math and baking. I got off the phone and I said, I wish there was a way that they could take their phone, take a picture or video of what they're doing, type a narrative description, have some AI read that description, match it to a state standard, right? And then upload a picture or video, and then that count as documentation, to which I heard a voice say, build it. So I did. And when I built it, well, let me say it right. I authored the app. I didn't write the code. But my developer at the time, he said, I think you have a real use case for blockchain. And I said, block what? This was back in 2017. And he explained what blockchain was. And that's where it made sense. Now, that was 2016, 2017, right? When I used the words decentralized learning back then, people didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, it's too early.
Too early. Welcome to my life. Too
Yeah.
early, right? So, but now when I mention decentralization, more people understand what I'm talking about. So for us, for me, just like Mark Zuckerberg, how he changed the name from Facebook to Meta, when I saw what was happening in the world of technology, and I saw that Web3 wanted to decentralize everything, and they went to education and they said, we got to decentralize education. Where's decentralized learning? And I said, oh, don't call it a comeback, because we've been here for years, okay?
Yeah.
All right. I said, no. I said, I'm right here, Suge. Hey, we've been here, okay?
Yeah.
And so that's where I started teaching courses called Meet Me at the Corner. Now, I'm from Philly, right? So I grew up in the city. So when you go outside, you want to play with your friend, you yell up the street, hey, yo, meet me at the corner. And so I began yelling in the world of Web3 and in the world of education, meet me at the corner of Unschooling Avenue and Web3 Boulevard. Because right there is where you're saying the same things, but on different sides of the street, right? So in my mind, a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, fits perfectly. All I did, Satish, is I just simply took what was happening in Sudbury schools, agile learning centers for the past 50 years, and I put it on chain. I created a way to document it. I put AI in the app to translate it. And then I went to crypto to fund it. That's it.
I saw the coin. I was like, ooh, I have 10 more questions. I had a similar voice that told me I got to get involved in education, probably like you. And the same voice, when I heard it, I was like, well, I don't even know what to call this thing. And it's like, what's your perfect school? I said, my perfect school would be really cool. And then I thought of Coolio, one of my favorite artists.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way Schoolio.com is available. And it was.
Yep. There you go.
5 years later. So I appreciate the voice. So are you an infrastructure for anybody to build their own micro school that is decentralized and with this app to document the learning process, or I don't know what the other version of that is? Or do you run a school? Tell me what the creation of this extension of this is.
So to answer your first question, yes, we are an organization where if someone said to me, oh my gosh, I want an unschooling school in my city, I want that. How can I get that? And I would say, yes, you can have yourself a Geniī DAO school. Now, how did we get to this point? So last year, actually, when we moved from Pennsylvania to Atlanta in December of 2019, I held the first interest meeting for our school here in Atlanta in January 20th, 2020, right? Right, exactly.
And I think that's around the same time Schoolio was a seed in my head. Wow.
And had a great turnout. And then we all know what happened a few months later in the world with pandemic, right? So we pivoted and we took we had a small little group of students and we went online. First, we went to Zoom like everyone did at first, but then I found this lovely thing called GatherTown. And so we went to a 2D metaverse in GatherTown back in 2020. Had amazing fun time, got really, really, really good at being able to create a self-directed learning community virtually, right? Got really great at that. But then we always wanted to go to the in-person school. And the reason why that was important for me, Satish, is when my husband died and I found myself as a widowed single mom, I said, well, I want to create a solution to the edges. I want to solve for the edges. Solving for the middle is only for me being an online community. What about that single mom that said, look, I want to do this, but I got to work 2 jobs. I need a place to drop off my kid, right? So that's why we wanted to have the in-person community. So we started with an in-person community in Maryland, DC. We had one here in Atlanta. We were building one in California and 2 in Kampala, Uganda. That's an amazing story, right? And so last year was an amazing year. Last September, all cylinders were firing. But then we ran into a problem. And it is one of the 5 areas that I'm committed to solving in the world of self-directed education. The 5 areas are awareness. People don't even know that there's schools like this that exist. Accessibility, diversity. Back then, I didn't see too many people who looked like me that were starting, self-directed learning schools. Documentation, we solved that with the app. But then there was the number one, which was funding. And so because of the lack of funding, our schools completed their round. Our school in Maryland, DC completed a school year last May, and then we decided to pause so that we can solve the funding issue. So I still have people that come to me and say, how can I have this school in my community? And I say to them, give me a few weeks, give me a few months. Let me create this funding source first so that I can say to you, I want to reverse the model, right? I want to reverse the model, Satish, that says either you're going to give me $50,000 to start a school, because then that is only for a select group of people that have access to that amount of capital. And again, I'm solving to the edges, right? Not just for the happy place in the middle, but for the raggedy edges, right? And so then I need to flip that model. And in the world of Web3 and in the world of crypto, I can raise a significant amount of capital that then I can say to that person, you don't need a whole 50,000 in order to start a Geniī DAO school, right? You only need a portion of that. And here, let me grant you the rest so that you can go ahead and create real opportunities for families. I ask families, children, parents, teachers, community members, who do you never get to be in school? And the number one answer from teachers, sometimes from superintendents that meet with me, under cover of dark and different name, the number one answer is the same. And they always say, I never get to be free to be me. Thus the name of the token, Be Me Token, right?
Right.
So my goal is to create spaces where everyone gets to be free to be themselves. And then to piggyback on what you said about, pods, microschool, and, where's all that going? We are organized as a private school. And the reason we're organized as such is that provides the greatest amount of coverage to the edges.
Right. From
so
accreditation, from fund, like, what does that mean?
Correct. All of that. It makes all of that possible. So we're not accredited yet. There's the states play a little funky game about, who you get accredited from based on if you're going to receive state funding. So that's a different ball game, different conversation. But the reason why I didn't want to be a learning pod, the reason why I didn't want to be a co-op, the reason why, the word microschool is fairly new and it's quite ambiguous, because I always say to microschool founders, what legality are you solving for the state? The state really doesn't care what label you put on it, Suge. You can be whatever. The state is going to say to that parent, you either have public school, private school, or homeschool. The state doesn't recognize a learning pod. Either that kid is going to be a registered homeschooler going to a pod, or that pod is going to be a private school, and that parent is going to tell the kid, my kid is enrolled in this private school. So microschool founders have to first solve for that. Which one of those three, correct, are you going to be? So I chose a private school distinction because it gives the highest level of protection, and the highest level of freedom for parents. Yeah. Now, we might have some parents that say, I really don't need 4 to 5 days. I only want 2 to 3 days. Sure, then you can be a homeschooler and then come, for 2 to 3 days. So right now, we do not have an active community. It was the hardest thing for me to do, Satish, is to pause, because I chose to build with integrity.
Yeah.
And for me, integrity means nothing missing, nothing broken. It means whole and complete. And so while we had a very active community, while the kids were thriving, the parents, the directors, the facilitators, and myself, financially, it wasn't sustainable.
And this is a great conversation around funding, because as I'm paying attention to the conversation in the group, a lot of it comes down to, can we get funding? Can we get grants? Do we know how to do it?
Yep.
And my question was, if I look at it as a startup, and there's customers waiting, willing to pay whatever the market value is for your opportunity. Let's say it's $1,000 that a kid willing to pay for a month. Would the cost to run that thing be covered by the number of kids that will show up, plus maybe an incremental that is usually a margin? So, is the school supposed to be big? Is it supposed to be small? How do you determine the right funding need based on the size?
Great question. One of my favorites. When I looked at the funding model that was already in existence in these kinds of private schools, and I'm going to use the word private school as opposed to micro school so that people are clear on my designation. When I looked at Sudbury schools first, and then I looked at Agile Learning Centers second, and I have great respect for both organizations. They are, my big brothers, big sisters in my mind, right? Forerunners paved the way. I saw something that was missing though, which was the amount that a lot of the times the facilitators received was not a respectable living wage. And I saw that there was in some schools a high turnover of facilitators because they had to work 2 jobs, especially if these are people in a certain category of life where they have families themselves, children themselves, and don't have a kid in college. So that funding model wasn't sustainable. Now, to answer your question specifically, is it a matter of X number of kids then covers, the amount that we need? Now let's look at the amount that we need. There is usually rent, salary, right? Insurance, transportation, if you include that, are usually the big bucket items when it comes to funding. Rent, depending on where you live in the country, you out the gate right there.
Yeah.
Off rip, right? On rent. Then let's talk about salary. This for me needs to be a full-time commitment. And I want to bring the respect that the gift that we are creating for families to live in freedom and autonomy and full self-expression. And the people who hold that space are the directors and the facilitators. So why in the world would I pay them less than what that is worth?
Exactly.
They are literally holding space for human beings to remember their purpose and to come in alignment with who they are. So why would I pay them any less than a respectable wage? So when I look at the numbers, for us, I have to find the funding somewhere else. So I could have done that. I could have said, all right, $600,000 is how much we need, right? Okay, let's see. If we want to keep it around, 500 or 50 kids, do the math to see how much that is, right? I could have done that. For some of my families, maybe they could have paid that. Most of my families could not.
Right.
And then realistically looking at, I'm in Atlanta, looking at what commercial real estate, because I want this to be sustainable, right?
Right.
I could have met in a church, but then now I'm subject to somebody else's, regulation. And then, that setting might not be, palatable for every family.
Yeah.
So for me, the funding needed to come from somewhere else, not off of the back of my families, which is why my goal is to create a maker space inside of a commercial building where the building can pay for itself. So when the kids go home, 3 or 4 o'clock, this building now opens up and it becomes exactly what this community is willing and able to pay for. I've done the work to ask the community, what do you want? What problem exists in your community that a building could solve? And are you willing to pay for it? And if so, how much? And based on that data, now I can look at what is it that I'm going to create that I know this community absolutely wants, right? And then the building funds itself.
I like it. Okay.
Not to mention a couple of mil, from a token, not to mention that.
Listen, I think as the general public wakes up to the power of tokens, the power of blockchain as a way to make sure the data is accurate and protected. And I think we've gone past the era of the NFTs and the scammers and the rug pull. That needed to happen for the
to get out
industry
of the way. Yeah.
right? And as regular, because we also looked into it at Schoolio to go, listen, we can continue to raise money and dilute, and all it takes is one wrong investor to try to push us to be something different.
Right.
Or we create a value add to the customers to say every dollar you spend with us, by default, you get X amount of tokens, but you can double up and triple up to support us if you believe it's worth something. We went down that rabbit path. But I was like, man, I just, the technical process of setting up a token and going through all of the documentation.
15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Karema, your 15 minutes is 15,000 years in my brain. So I need to figure it out. So the next thing that everybody sort of talks about is whether it's unschooling or folks that run home-based microschool with Schoolio. Explain to somebody when they adopt your philosophy, the kids show up in the morning. What happens?
Oh, this is my favorite part. All of it is my favorite part. You're going to hear me say that about 3 more times. So this is where I, again, have taken what my big brothers and big sisters and Sudbury schools and Agile Learning Centers have already created. I don't believe in recreating the wheel. You know, I'm too old for all of that. So I simply take what works and I will use it. What doesn't work, I will transform it. So our learning communities look very much like an Agile Learning Center. So you come in, and first of all, what we're building in here in Atlanta, everyone sits with me prior for the genius conversation, right? So they invent a new possibility, a new way of being. So when I ask that question, who do you never get to be? And the answer is I never get to be free to be me. Well, what would that look like if you're being yourself? Oh man, the kids say, I would be so creative. I would get to be connected with other people. So whatever they invent as a possibility, that's on the wall, right? So when you walk in, you're going to walk past your possibility every single day. First thing we do is a spawn point. Again, these are terms that are very familiar to Agile Learning Centers. Spawn point, where you have a mindful moment. You look at the schedule for the day, for the week. You decide what it is that you are going to commit yourself to do, right? You have a mindful moment. We ask you, all right, what do you want to have at the end of the day today? What will you need to do in order to have that? And then who will you need to be today in order to do what you say you want to do, in order to have what you say you want to have? After some deep cleansing breaths, we say, all right, go be in flow. And then the rest of the day flows like a university model. So the week prior, we are organized by corporations, very similar again to Sudbury schools, right? So we might have the art corporation, the book corporation, we had a movie show corporation, that YouTube corporation. I came to YouTube corporation with a pen and paper saying, okay, now teach me, oh, thou great content creator children. So we have these different corporations that the students create and lead on their own. And then their ambassadors put their corporations on the weekly schedule, right? So then the learners have already committed to whatever corporations they're in. So a learner might say, okay, so today after my spawn point, I have a meeting at the art corp for an hour. Then after that, I have the book corp. Then, I had signed up for a math class. We, very similar to you, we are building a marketplace, a virtual marketplace that will meet in our gather space space. So kids can take any course. Would love to see how we can partner together. Schoolio could be that, right? For us. I don't have to do everything by myself. But really it is the learners building their day based on whatever it is that they are in alignment with, whatever matters most to them. In addition to our virtual marketplace, in addition to the corporations, we have what I call our 5-pillar invitations. These things got created to teach when my 6 kids were getting older and leaving the home. And I said, now, what is it that I want to expose you to so that I can make sure you have the best chance in life? So once a week, the Genius School or Geniī DAO director will invite the learners to a 5-pillar invitation. Pillar number 1 is know thyself. That's where learners create what we call a good experience, something that they actively make happen, that they say they enjoy, they do well, they're proud of, like a passion project. So the director will sit with them and say, okay, tell me what you have as a passion project Tell me, what did you have to do to have this project? And then their peers will listen for who they had to be. And it's a very beautiful, affirming process, right? Again, you're going to hear me say those words, be, do, and have, multiple times. So that's pillar 1. Pillar 2 is know thy source. How do you take care of yourself? How do you resource yourself physically, mentally, socially, emotionally? Do you know how to get the support that you need? Do you know how to contact a therapist? How do you take care of your body, right? So we'll invite professionals to come in and to talk to the kids about how to do that. Have some young men that wanted to lift weights. We're going to bring in a personal trainer to show you how to do that correctly.
Love that.
Pillar 3 is know how to be financially sustainable. Let's just pause right there.
When I saw that on your website, I was like, I'm done.
Let's just pause right there. As a mama of, almost 5 adult children, right? I want to make sure that you know how to take care of yourself, provide for yourself in all ways. Traditionally, if you're going to go get a job, if you're going to be a business owner, if you're going to be self-employed, if you're going to be an investor. So we invite people to do that. Kids have questions. They want to know, well, this thing called credit, how do I get it? When do I start? Right? If I'm going to go to college and I hear I got to get loans, how do I pay them back? Right? What is a W-2, W-9? I'm about to go working at Chick-fil-A. I need to fill out these forms. What is this? Right? So we invite them to learn that. Pillar number 4 is know thy world, where older learners, this is one of my other favorite things too, they execute autonomous scavenger hunts in their neighborhood. So the adults will create an itinerary, the kids will research it, plan it, we drop them off and say bye-bye, see you in a couple of hours, and then they go off and complete their task. And then pillar 5 is knowing how to serve your community with your gifts.
That's a big one.
Yeah. And so that's what the week could be made of. And then the only thing that's mandatory, only thing ever that's mandatory in our community, just like Sudbury and Agile, is our community meeting. This is where we take a detour away from Sudbury, where Sudbury is very much with their judiciary court, right? Judiciary council, where the kids are writing tickets for each other and there's a judge and jury and all that. This is where we lean heavily on Agile Learning Centers, where there's a community awareness. What are you aware of that's working or not? Submit a proposal. The children discuss to come to consensus. I didn't prompt them to do that. That's something that they naturally did. They vote on it. We practice it. Then it becomes mastery. Now, in our world as a DAO, this is where we bring in that technology, that blockchain technology, right? So the learners do not have wallets. Let me be clear. Our students do not have digital wallets. Our students are not yet voting on chain, but the directors and facilitators are voting on chain. Okay.
That's what I was curious about, because the model, if it goes too far down, I was like, how do you control that when young people have a vote?
Yeah. Now, so 2 parts of that question. So the technical side is that, no, we don't have learners with digital wallets. They're not connecting to Snapshot, which is a Web3 platform where you vote with your wallet and you're voting on blockchain. We don't do that. But do we give our learners autonomy over making decisions? Absolutely. Does that sometimes go a little bit crazy? Oh, you better believe it. We as adults can see that is about to hit the fan, right? And now, of course, this isn't, kids creating their governance in a vacuum. This is the adults also saying, okay, now let's talk about it. Now, if you do that, it's going to, what could happen? And so all the possibilities come up. But what I love most is, words really don't teach. Experience really is the best teacher. Yes. And I love giving children the space to do that, to make a decision, live with that thing for a minute, walk it out, right? And if it doesn't fit, come back to the meeting and say, you know what? I propose that we don't do that anymore because that didn't work. Yeah. And then now they own that process for themselves, right? I'm not chasing them down. They see for themselves that doesn't work. This to me is the beauty of what we have in this opportunity of parenting at this age, the age that we're in, because I love allowing children to fail.
Yeah, I love that. Oh,
yeah.
I love that. Okay, so we've got about 13 minutes left.
Okay.
So here's my summary for all those other folks that are watching this right now.
Sure.
One, if you don't know where to start or don't know what model you need, don't call it anything but private schools, because at least you have a starting point that the other side of the system understands. Two, if you don't have a blueprint or an infrastructure of what to do next, maybe you have space but don't know what to do with it. Maybe you have funding or some way to start your own space, but you don't know what to do with that thing. Now you can talk to Karema and understand what a decentralized model look like. Even if you're not committed to the DAO and the blockchain,
Correct.
I love what happens during the day and the model you've built. Third, from a curriculum or no curriculum, autonomous learning, decentralized learning, there's many, many models. You've got a vision. We don't operate schools. We're a facilitator of a learning model where one subscription allows you to be fully scheduled and sort of roadmapped if you're a very strict educator at home, or you can open up and let the kids play around and learn themselves. And there's a bunch of different cool ways, and we sort of mimicked some of the philosophy you have on an online platform. So there's a bunch of options there to choose from. If we both are in this now, I'm not moving back. This is not a hobby anymore. This is an all-in thing for me.
Correct.
Where does this movement go next? Is it coming out of the pandemic? Now we have entrepreneurs and passionate parents and educators coming over to this side to be part of the movement. I feel like in the next 5 years, the choice of where does my child go to school or study no longer starts with the local school.
Correct.
That's not the first choice anymore. How do you see the future?
I see I listen to what's already being asked. Then I read between the lines and I listen for what is not as being said, but is in the mix. Parents and teachers right now, they have their eyes closed and their arms are outstretched and they are reaching for something. They know it when they feel it, but they don't know what it's called, right? What they're looking for is autonomy. What they're looking for is authenticity. What they're feeling for is rooted in joy. What they're feeling and looking for is something that is rooted in liberation and decolonizing parenting. It's rooted in consent. It feels like flow. It feels like alignment with who this person is versus who that person is. It is not one size fits all. It is postmodern education is decentralized, autonomous learning. And how do I know? I went to ASU, GSV some years ago, year before last, whole entire conference. The entire conference was about learner-centered classrooms. The entire conference. And I'm walking around like, are y'all serious? So much so that I ran and met into public school teachers who were so frustrated, almost to the point of tears, because they want this, but their hands are tied. So I agree with you. It will not be, where does my kid go to school based on, my local, zip code. Instead, it will be, who is this kid? And then what type of environment does this kid need to be in? Now, there is still hope for public schools. Let me just say this. And I know that we're not, you and I are not in that system. But again, remember, I saw for the raggedy edges, right? Everybody. Now, there are, as long as the United States government mandates what I call the 13-year sentence, and there will still be the space that these kids might have to go to, right, for various different reasons, then let me decentralize the public school, right? So our app makes that possible. So I'm a former public school teacher. I know that there are kids in this building that don't fit. The teachers know that there are kids in here that don't fit, right? And I'm going to tell the truth. These are the kids that when you're a teacher and it's test week, you kind of hope that they don't come to school that week. Don't put it out there. So then give me those kids. Let me come in your public school. Give me those kids that don't perform well in your tests. Let me create a micro DAO school inside of your public school. I'll give you the app, right? Those babies are going to be on whatever they love to do. They're going to document it on the app. The app is going to translate to demonstrate mastery of state assessments because they can do it. They just 100%. Might not do it well to perform on this test. So I agree 100%. With you. The future of education is individualized. It is community owned, community governed, and I mean local community, small community governed. It is a decentralized, autonomous organization for decentralized learning.
I love it. And as my vision expands in this company, because I started with I don't really know what I'm doing other than like you, I was reaching for something, knowing I'm full of discomfort. My co-founder took both her kids out. She's a certified teacher, and she was like, I'm ready to do it. But I was like, I don't, for me, the pain was there, but it wasn't enough to push me to figure it out, because I'm not an educator, and we're in Canada. So, a lot of the content was American or not secular. But now as my vision gets bigger, like you, we're like, man, imagine a world where there's a whole bunch of these amazing micro schools or private schools, but now the facilitator's passion comes through. I would, in a heartbeat, if I could, start a micro school that's infused with music and DJ equipment everywhere and drum kits, and we'll learn through music and play.
Yeah.
And now it's possible. And similar to you, I reached out to a whole bunch of, educators saying, listen, if falling behind, gap filling, and absentee is an issue, instead of dragging them back to school, just give them Schoolio. Then they can study at home, or they can study whatever, but there's still a roadblock. And instead of putting all of our attention to solve it, we just go build something else that just takes care of what the customer needs. And so this is fantastic. Thank you for sharing all this knowledge. It's 100% useful. I've seen all the conversations in the Microschool group, and so many of those questions you answered today, which is amazing. And I hope everybody watching is going to reach out to you on LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff.
Awesome.
And it looks like you're open to meeting and sharing with people, which is important.
Absolutely. The last thing I'll say very quickly, our GENIE app, I am reaching out to either Microschool founders, anyone who would like to use the app. We just received a grant to upgrade the app. And so I would really love to partner with folks. My goal is 1,000 daily active users on the app by the end of, say, February, March. So that would be great. And then, of course, with our token, our BB token, I'll say this very quickly. Constitution DAO back in 2021. Have you heard that story?
No.
Constitution DAO. Oh, man. A group of people said they wanted to auction off the Constitution. A group of people said they wanted to buy it. They said, what if we pull together our crypto to buy the Constitution at this auction? My friend, they were able to raise $47 million in 4 days.
Wow.
4 days, by people contributing their ETH, their Ethereum, which is a token, right? When I heard that, I said, now, if they could do that for a chance, and they lost at the auction.
Wow.
Right. But if they could do that for a chance, then I know I could do this for our babies.
100%. And,
so that's what I'm after.
Yeah. And we're going to do our best to continue down this integration of DAO and tech. And, I mean, listen, we're committed to it only because I want to build a company owned by the community.
And
our dream is to, turn Schoolio into a DAO. And as people learn what that means, they'll understand the importance. We've got a pretty big mailing list. A lot of our customers are also American. So I'll connect you with Lindsay, and let's do an e-blast about the app, and let's talk about it, and let's see if we can help bring some adoption.
And I'll show you how you can turn that into a DAO. Very easy.
Amazing.
15 minutes.
Amazing. Tell them quickly where to follow you on your website.
Oh, my goodness. First of all, thank you for this conversation. If you want to learn more, you can always visit us at Geniī DAO. That is GENIIDAO.school. GeniiDAO.school.
Amazing. And we'll get our content team to drop a whole bunch of that in the video.
Yay.
What an incredible conversation.
Thank you so much.
I think your perseverance and just your attitude of, we're going to figure this out no matter what, I love is infectious. And thank you for that.
Thank you.